Okay, so in this episode of the Vernon and Richard show, it is mostly me talking for the whole episode. We answer questions about whether your code should be in the same repository. We answer questions around how to go about selecting tools. We have a bit of a rabbit hole into the world of AI, and we discuss the technical skills versus coding skills, senior versus junior. And yeah, we don't mention football one bit at all in the whole episode. So enjoy and let us know what you think in the comments.
Hand it over, hand it over, hand it over, Manchester.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the happiest I've seen Vernon in a very long time, Richard show.
Liverpool, Liverpool, champions, champions,
Oh, my goodness.
champions, champions.
Oh, mate, I don't know what to do. Oh, this is torture. This is torture. Oh, right. Vernon, people, not everyone understands football, and if you're listening, you might not have a clue what's going on. Vernon, tell everyone what you're wearing and why you're wearing it. Come on, get it out
I
there.
am wearing an old kit of the greatest football team on the face of the earth. That's right, Liverpool Football Club, who have triumphed over every other Premier League team to become the most successful, I said it, the most successful club in England, taking out the wretched red half of Manchester, taking the Premier League champion title off of the blue half of Manchester. It's just Manchester's getting it in the neck in this episode, but really this is about making Bradshaw miserable. I'm not too fussed about making Man City fans miserable. They've had a wonderful time. It's going to take probably more than one championship victory for Liverpool to make them miserable, but Manchester United fans, they are in the mud right now, man. And I love to see it. So yeah, Liverpool, we won the league on the Sunday that's just gone as we record this podcast, and it was absolutely glorious.
All right, let's give you something you can use forever. Honestly, congratulations, mate. Like, you've been rock solid all season. I have no argument. My team is utter trash.
Oh mate,
absolutely
not even at the
shocking,
races.
which only makes your success even happier for you. But yeah, congratulations, well done.
I've got to tell you, folks. I made sure that I arrived after Richard. I wanted to see his face when I showed up, and he just, to be fair to him, he took it rather well. He just burst out laughing.
I'm in a really good place in the world, so like that helps. Like, but also, if we had been remotely close, I probably might have cared more. But we are so far off the mark.
Yeah, it's true.
I'm actually pleased for you.
Manchester,
not City, so
yeah, Manchester United, mate. I got to tell you, we were chatting before we started recording, and the gap is so wide. Sorry, non-football fans. Just indulge me a little bit longer. We'll make sure it's chaptered. So you've probably skipped this anyway. Tomorrow, Manchester are playing in the semi-final of a competition called the Europa League, and should they win that, they get into a competition called the Champions League, which is where all the so-called big teams in Europe want to be part of that. And usually you can qualify in one of two ways. You can qualify via the league, or you can qualify via a cup competition. And it's more difficult to qualify. Well, they're both pretty tricky, to be fair, but because of Manchester United's current form, they have got so little chance of doing it that it would please me greatly if they fail, because then they'll be out of Europe completely, because they're not going to get into any European competition by the league. They're not going to, if they don't win the Europa League, they're out. They're out. And it would just be so deliciously glorious. So yeah, and I'm going up to Liverpool for the parade. So that would be fantastic. Going up there with my nephew, who supports Liverpool. So that would be great. And yeah, it's going to be awesome. Thought I'd colour coordinate with a red cap, just keep it all nice and rouge. So yeah, sorry. So apologies, non-football fans, but I couldn't resist the banter for Bradshaw.
Right. Well, there you go. Devastated.
Oh, that was totally worth it. That was totally worth it.
Absolutely devastated. Right. Well, to cheer me up, we've selected automation as the topic of choice, because hopefully that means I can talk a lot and we won't hear anything about Liverpool.
Will we hear about lots of Green and what deployments? Green and. All right. I'm gonna stop. I'm not.
Your pipeline's far more consistent than ours at the moment. Like, your tests are passing, ours are failing, blowing up. Packages are outdated. Dependencies are destroyed.
Oh mate. Oh dear.
Stadiums in bits. Come on, like, what other analogies can we throw at it? Like,
yeah, there's probably like 2 listeners left at this point. So let's get back into this.
But yeah, we're going to talk about automation. We've got a few questions that have come into us. Some from our trusted Emily again. Thank you, Emily. Someone joked the other day that this should be called the Vernon, Richard and Emily show for the last few releases.
It should be, man. It should be.
But just say, anyone got any questions at all, any topics, please ping them in a chat. We will jump on them because we find it so much easier. And Otherwise, we talk about Liverpool for an hour. All right, yeah. So we've got some questions on automation. But before we dive into these questions, there's a couple of threads on LinkedIn recently, and I thought they're worth... I don't know, I feel like I want to define automation again, because I'm on a project at the moment and we're doing lots of automation, right? And it's great. But again, the word means very specific thing in this context, as I think it does in a lot. But I think like in the wider learning or community of testing, like automation obviously has different definitions. And I think I just wanted to talk about it for a second because I'm finding a really interesting... I've had a really interesting observation with the AI tools that have come out. Like, and when I say AI tools, I mean like ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude.
Okay.
How people have so quickly just brought them in as tools. Yet me and people like Mark Winteringham have spent the last 10 years going, build tools, use tools, Chrome extensions, tools, automation, software to help you. And everyone's been like, no. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, not sure.
Yet suddenly everyone's like, bring in all the AI goodness, right? And it's actually helping me because it fits the narrative that we've been pushing for 10 years, which is automation is just the use of tools. Mm-hmm. It's software. And in the testing space, there's so many uses that you can use software for to help you with your testing. Be that automated tests, automated checks, be that a tool to load data, a tool to make parsing log files easier, a tool to parse a PDF, right? Or a Chrome extension. And I had a post on LinkedIn the other day where I had an idea for a Chrome extension. I did some vibe coding with AI and I got the thing built in 7 minutes. There's all these options. So before we dive into this topic, these questions mostly are about automated testing, as I would refer to it. Mm-hmm. But I want people to start thinking broader when it comes to automation. It's far more than a test framework. Yes. We should start thinking of having a framework that multiple tools come out of that help us basically test. And also even more so in that going forward, I'm seeing a lot more people building custom tools to help with the quality side of it now. Actually, dashboards, metrics, things that aren't normally measured because the tools aren't there yet to do kind of quality analytics style things, but we can build them. So yeah, that's my little mini soapbox.
What crispy one-liner that you want people to remember as we go through these questions?
I don't really have a one-liner as such. We still have the definition of automation in testing. So that was like a name I came up with after talking to a chap called Mark Tomlinson on a podcast, actually, where I explained, it was quite funny how it happened because I gave 3 examples of tools that I'd built and I can't remember what the tools were now, but they weren't automated tests. And at the end of it, Mark said, what should we call it? And I was like, I have no idea, mate. And he's like, what about beyond test automation? And I was like, well, it's not test automation.
Beyond
and he was like,
test
automation test tools and stuff like this. I was like, yeah, but it's not automation test tools. I'm using automation in the context of testing. And that's where AIT came from, automation in testing. But yeah, we say, or I say these days, is automation in testing is a mindset and a namespace. So we say that first. It's a way of thinking about automation that promotes human-centric automation within the context of testing. That's probably what AIT is. If you ask me for just one line of what automation is, I would just say it's the use of software to support testing or quality initiatives. Simple as that, I think.
So bear that in mind, folks, as Rich and I are chatting about this. I'm just going to start from the top, unless you've got an objection with that.
No, go for it.
Okay, so first question says, At my current work, the testers own an automation framework for API tests and UI tests, but it sits in its own repo. At my old place, all the code relating to one project would exist in the same repo so that the developers could run tests against their local at the same time they're writing unit and snapshot tests. What do you think to these approaches?
It depends.
Oh, God.
I have a preference of having them in the same code base.
Mm-hmm.
However, interestingly today, in the context I'm in right now, we had a code freeze. But because we're in the mono repo, our code also gets frozen. So the in-dev tickets have kind of finished, but we've not finished our automation yet. But now we can't merge it. Well, we can merge it. That's not true. We can merge it, but we can't do it now. We have to get DevOps to selectively. Yeah. And I say DevOps in the case of a team in this instance. I know that's not how people like it, but in this context, I can
hear people vomiting and having allergic
DevOps
reactions
is a team.
to that. Yeah.
So there's like one side of it. I think there's a few aspects, thinking on the fly here, of things I would consider. In some cases, there's a lot of code or objects or classes that we can use from the real code in our test frameworks, such as POJOs or objects, plain old objects that might exist in that code base that define a model, such as a user, right? And then we end up duplicating that in our code base to assign values to fill in a website or make an API call, right? So we can have consistency with those objects. There's that side of it when it comes to code, and there's definitely reuse. There depends on languages. Like we were discussing this by the time this comes out, it might be announced. So yeah, it will be announced. So yeah, so we can share this now because by the time you listen to this, it will be announced. So I'm one of the free leads of the Automation Deep Dive at Agile Testing Days in November, along with Gil Zilberfeld. Sorry, I got his name wrong again. Gil Zilderfeld and Christian Baumann. I probably got that wrong too.
No, I think that's right. I think you nailed it.
Okay, we'll take that. Sorry,
Gil
folks.
Zilberfeld and Christian Baumann.
We'll learn I'll nail the pronunciation before the deep dive.
You got a few months to learn it.
Yeah, but the reason I mentioned that, so that's going to happen, but that's going to be awesome. We're having a 3-day deep dive. We're going to do automation patterns. We're going to do targeted automated tests, and we're going to do test data management. Those are the 3 things we're going to cover over the 3 days.
Okay.
But we were discussing what language should we write this workshops in.
Okay.
So if we're going to have a test app and we're going to have test code, what language do we choose? And we chose TypeScript purely because a lot of the popular tools out there now are written in TypeScript. So we chose TypeScript, and then that led to a conversation where we went, a lot of people do use TypeScript, but they don't use TypeScript for their app. Their app's written in Java or C#. And then that might become complicated to have them in the same mono repo. I'm not saying impossible, because it's definitely not, right? But it becomes a complex, complicated build then.
It's not
because
as straightforward.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you wanted to do linting, you'd have to say only these files, right? Because you obviously, but there's solvable problems, right? But
people do it. It's
does your context have the time and the skills to have those solvable problems? So sometimes it makes sense to keep them separate. But I think you've hit the last part of that question. The developers could run the test against their local. They still can. If it's not a mono repo, they still can. Just check out the other repo and run the command, right? Like there's no, yes, that's opening another project and it's another folder, but they still can.
That is the issue though, because one kind of stereotype about developers that I think is legit, has some weight, is that they don't like being inefficient. They don't like having to, every time I'm trying to build this thing, I've now got to go to another repo and run some stuff. That it sounds trivial, but is it? Like, how many times would you have to do that in a given work day, in a given work week, etc.? And it kind of compounds over time. Is it? Because I'm not. That's not my line of work, right? So is that seemingly small amount of friction? Could that become a bit of a pain in the bum over the course of time and cause people not to do it? Because I wonder if that's what the kind of implied assumption is in there. Do you know what I mean?
Maybe, but this ties nicely into what we just said around automation in testing and building tools, right? So a common way of doing these tests in the first place is to have pre-commit hook. So before you commit, you run linting and other things, right? So you could just have a bash script
that goes in.
So solvable problem.
Yeah.
So I hear you, but yeah, I think the other side of it though is having them in a nice. My preference, if we're going to discuss what do I think about the approach, is I prefer single code base. I like to see the changes. I like to see the PRs, and I know I can see them in the other repos, but seeing them all in the same place just makes it easier for me. And also from the way I automate, I like to look at the actual code that I'm automating. How have they written it? Can I see some things that might cause oddities with the way I'm scripting
about when
it?
you say see the code that you're automating, you're talking about the application code.
Yeah, the application
that
code.
Your test code is exercising and running. Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
And again, I can go see it in a different repo. Of course I can. But you've just said the same thing about developers. If we go a layer up, I'm an engineer. I like efficiency too.
I did. I was using the higher up.
So, I know you were. Yeah, intentionally. And it's the same for me. So I prefer it in the same code base. I think it's easier for scripting. I think it's easier to see what's going on. I think there's probably efficiencies in there somewhere. I don't know them myself, but around, dependencies and managing stuff like that, and the ability to write scripts and deploy stuff from the same folders. All that's probably slightly easier. Standards across code bases. So again, one of the topics on the deep dive is patterns. Mm-hmm. There will be a lot of good standards probably in the developer code. Mm-hmm. And why aren't we treating the test code with the same standards?
The same level of rigor.
So if that rigor and standards are there, then again, that's easy enough to turn on without having to set up another another project with another linting and another set of rules. It's all in the same project. So I think there's benefits to it, and I think it's easier. However, I have been in contexts where, as I said, the apps, it's in a crazy repo. It's not even a repo. It's a Salesforce app, for example. Right? It's it's a website built for a wizard, right? There is no code. It's just the UI, right? So in those examples, you kind of have no choice, right? So again, I think I would prefer it, but I can think of plenty of contextual reasons, or that use the right term, testability reasons, why I would not do it.
Would it make sense to? I can almost predict what you might say here, but could you have it as like an intermediate step? So you have all of your test code in a separate repo to get it up to muster. And then once you've got it into a place where actually we trust this code, we like this code, it's doing what we want it to do. Now we'll, the code into a single repo. Is that a sensible? Can that work, or is that kind of a waste of time? Should it just be, let's just rip the plaster off, as they say, and just stick everything in the same place and see what happens?
Many, many things flying through my head. I think some developers, some teams have initial angst, I guess, around giving someone who they might view as less technical or less efficient or less disciplined access to the repo. I then think there's challenges with automation that we always see in this instance. So I've built a POC over here, right? And I've automated 5 tests and I've shown them to everyone. My tech lead or my SO or one of the stakeholders is now sat over here going, look at that, that's amazing, I want 10 more. It's like, no, I've got to put it in the repo and build a pipeline. No.
Whoa.
I want 10 more right now.
Yeah.
Like,
give me
off you
that.
Go. So there's that danger as well of but that can be mitigated right by clear definitions what a POC is and stuff. But are we doing a POC in your scenario, or are we just literally starting off in a separate repo and then hoping to bring it in? Because what I would also add on to that is, and I've not actually had to do this, but we talk about this at where I work at Slalom, is our usual day one or week one activities is to spin up the shell of a framework and just put a hello world test in it.
Exactly.
Then go and set up all the pipeline to kick off that hello world test and put the results in the right place.
Right, exactly.
And we do all that jazz
just
before we
literally get all the everything talking to each other,
pieces of the puzzle. Exactly.
Just get the skeleton together, and then we can start to swap that
and if you build
up
something not substantial, but if you've got a complex logic in there already or a couple of moving parts, it can also take longer to then do that pipeline bit because you're not sure what's going wrong. Like, is it the test? Is it, part of the test? Is it this library that I'm using? Is this API out of date? Like you start to get more like you've made the puzzle harder. So again, I think yes, you can do what you said, but again, I probably would choose not to.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, either or, don't matter. Context.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying then is you do have a preference, but ultimately it's our good old friend, it depends.
Yeah, I talk about the testability canvas, right? So everything for me is context. The layer on top of context is testability. That's the assessment of what the context does to your ability to test. That's how I define testability. So if I'd had developers like that are like, hey, you ain't coming anywhere near my code base, I'd put that's part of my context. I analyze that and say, I'm going to have a fight to get that code in that same repo. Mm-hmm. And then I'll pair that with, I don't know, an insatiable demand for having automation running ASAP. It has to happen. The client's been promised. That's part of the context. Mm-hmm. That's impacting my testability. There's two factors. If I analyze those two things, it's going to be quicker for me to get up and running in my own repo and do this. But what I would say as an experienced engineer is I would flag immediately at the start that I don't want it to stay this way. And that at some point in the distant future, I'm telling you right now, put a ticket in the backlog to move this back at some point once I've, proven myself to the worthy developers, or, I've shown that it's valuable, whatever the context is.
Yeah.
But I think that's what I mean. It's really important to have a look at your context. So what I would say is, if I'd written a book or I had something to offer you, because like a cheat sheet or something, I think there is rules. Like in my head, there is rules around which way I would go. So I say it depends, right? But I can almost guarantee if we had a table of context characteristics or testability characteristics, I would say if A and B are there, do one. If B, C, and D are there, do two.
What was that? You would like Richard to write that? You'd like Richard to create the content that describes the it depends. I mean, I'll ask him. He's got a bit of a hump.
One day.
Give me a sec.
One day.
So, Rich, are you volunteering to create this?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna.
Yeah, you said to go for it, mate. Yeah. Nice one. Yeah, cheers. All right, see you in a bit.
You know what? You're in such a funny mood or fun, playful mood that I expected you to respond to the fact I said number one then, and go, "What's that? What's team's number one?
What's that, mate? Number one."
Yeah, but there's definitely, there is underlying rules around. We all say it depends, and I love that because that's another thing we've seen on LinkedIn recently. You see, it depends all the time, and I can't remember who it was, but that should be the start. There should always be on at the end of that. It depends on, and on people need to start elaborating more instead of saying it depends, because that's where the gold is.
That is the thing that makes this conversation actionable and helpful for people. It's kind of say, well, okay, like you said, if given these things are true or false, then we do this, and given these things are true or false, then we do this. So yeah, I love that answer. So thanks for that question, Emily. I'm just gonna feed you questions because this is your wheelhouse here. So
okay.
If a test has failed due to a real regression bug, would you take the approach to skip it or leave the test failing in the pipeline and say, in the bug, pipeline should be green once the fix is merged?
Are we doing it depends again? So it depends.
I feel like I have a particular. I mean, go on.
Yeah, go for it. No, you go, mate. Go for it.
No. I just think yes, it depends, but generally speaking, skipping the test feels like a bad idea. It just feels like a bad idea to me. I can definitely imagine situations where it's a good idea, but just generally speaking, all things being equal, I do think skipping the failing test. What part of the reason of having these tools and using things like GUI automation, unit tests, pipelines, things like this is we want the feedback so that we can do something about it. So if we get something that fails and then we kind of say, well, that's not convenient to do that right now, it introduces this, you've kind of set the precedent that actually we don't need to do anything about it. We'll just skip it. We'll make our lives easier. And then when the next one fails, then it's easier to do it again. And then it's easier to do it again. And what you're trying to build a habit of is, whoa, something has failed. We need to do something about it. you know what I mean? So
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm a bit wary about skipping it, but like I said, I have seen situations where it does make sense to skip the tests. What do you think?
I've just written down 7 things to try and get them in a remotely sensible order because
So you
they're all
listen to me,
going
you're
around
like,
in my
I've
head.
got to get what I'm thinking out of my head, otherwise I'm fucked.
Because what you said is like there's subtle nuances to that, right? So I agree with you.
Yeah.
My first stance is we shouldn't be skipping any tests, right? But now that's
But
based on the assumption
here we go. It
that we're
depends.
automating things of value and things people care about and things that, if break, can't break, right?
Yeah.
So if that's how you've written your automation, and
Mm-hmm.
also very contextual to the team I'm on now, if that's how you've written it and they fail, that becomes the most important thing for your team to address right now,
Mm-hmm.
because that's functionality that you've delivered and that your
And you've
customers and
decided
clients.
if this fails, it breaks the build. Like we cannot
Yep,
ship with this.
exactly. And those customers are using that feature. They're expecting it. They've seen it. If you're in a situation with UAT and customer sign off, they've signed it off. As far as they're concerned, this works. So that then brings in the next complexity of, well, it's not working. So what do? You might have that conversation with the stakeholders. And if they say, yeah, you know what? Nah, it's fine, not interested, then I might skip it.
Now we've got exactly, yeah.
However, if they say, no, we need to fix it, I'll leave it broken.
Mm-hmm.
But also then if they say, not interested at all, just delete it.
Get this. That's not what
it.
They're basically saying we don't care about that. So like, fine, neither do we.
Exactly.
Gone.
Yeah, neither do we. Gone. But I've also seen really elaborate solutions. I've seen tests tied to a Jira ticket, to a bug, and they check the status of that bug. And if that bug is still open, they don't run. And as soon as that bug gets set to fixed or closed, then they run. Now that is nice, but that's complicated.
I was going to say,
unnecessarily complicated.
Is that a fancy pants version of saying the bug pipeline should be green once the fix is merged?
Yeah, it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you don't do that, like if you don't have that fancy automation tool, you're relying on someone bringing that ticket, that bug, that test back in, right, and actually unskipping it. And again, now that brings in another thing I wrote down. How disciplined is your team? How often are you reviewing skip tests?
This is the thing that I was worried about.
And I don't think it's a lot. And another one I say is not just skipped. How often are you reviewing your tests at all?
Period.
Or are you just adding green means good. Illusion of green, keep adding. Actually, no. If they're not valuable,
well,
you're just delaying your feedback by adding and adding.
Pun intended.
So
green is kind of addictive.
I'll need some of that to get over Liverpool's victory. But one last contextual thing is, what's your downstream process look like? So in a lot of teams, you can't deploy. Those are the rules.
This is the thing.
You cannot deploy. So therefore, can you now not deploy anything? Can you deploy hotfixes? What can you do?
So I was going to. That's what I was going. I've seen situations where, well, I suppose it is politics, but commercial reasons, business reasons. We kind of say, yes, dear engineers, we can see that thing is red, but we must ship because money. We must ship because relationships. We must ship because contracts. We must ship because let's build some trust. There's lots of more commercially focused reasons why.
But do you know what happens at that point?
Go on.
We start cherry picking. So now we start cherry picking commits out. And then suddenly now we've got a risk issue.
Nice nightmare fuel now.
Yeah. And now someone's
shipping is not the thing that we've tested.
Exactly. Yeah. And they've cherry picked. It might take a while to cherry pick. Just fix the bloody bug. Just fix it. But yeah, again, I think it's an absolutely fantastic question. My preference, number one, it would always be to just let the build keep failing. We actually have that situation right now. We have a test that will keep failing because it actually ties to a LinkedIn post some people might have seen. We have a PDF that gets generated and it gets downloaded and we check its contents. However, they've changed the behavior of the PDF because turns out our end users use an iPad. So before the button would download it, and then it would end up opening in whatever the iPad app is to open a PDF.
Yep.
They didn't want to do that, so now it opens in a new tab and uses the in-browser PDF viewer. So now we can't actually click a button and download it, which means we can't get its contents. So that test is failing. So I found an elaborate way of doing it, thanks to an awesome blog post by someone who builds a web scraping company about how you can change a header. There's a header, and I can't remember what it's called now. I think it's composition or something like that. I can't remember the exact header. But it basically tells the browser what to do with a file. And if you change
either download or just open it in the tab.
Exactly. But our server, our Salesforce instance, is always setting that header to be in line. So what we're doing in Play right now is capturing it, altering it to attachment,
and then sending it.
And then the browser thinks it's attachment and it downloads.
Clever.
But that's currently breaking our build. And I should give myself a pat on the back, because I brought that up in a question in the stand-up, and I said, how important is this in comparison to the in sprint tickets we're currently working on?
That is such an excellent question to ask.
We got the answer that it's critical. It has to be done. Again, more contextual, right? So they said it's important, it has to be done, but we actually prioritized in sprint tickets. The reason being is there's no planned release for 2 weeks.
Well, I was going to say,
we want to finish the sprint, even though finishing the sprint with a broken build, in my eyes, is not finishing the sprint. But the ticket work gets done.
It sounds like the right question, but I don't know. I guess what you're really asking in that situation is, what should we work on first?
Yeah.
And that answer didn't quite answer that question, because you still ended up going back to, it's like, well, it's important. So it's like, okay, so we know we've got to do this thing, but the in-sprint work versus this, which one is actually the priority? Turns out it was the in-sprint stuff.
I think there was 2 questions I asked actually on reflection. You've kind of reworded them. You've made me realise the wording I did choose, which was, number 1, is the test important? So actually, is this a functionality that matters, and do I need to fix it?
About before, right? It's like,
do you even care
about this thing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The second then question was, is that more important than the in-sprint work in terms of priority?
Perfect.
And the answer was the in-sprint work is more priority right now.
And now you know what to do. It's like, cool, now I can organise my time appropriately.
Yeah. So we went on and did that.
Nice.
So yeah, like I said, that is my preference, is to let the build fail. But I think after that, I would probably argue delete the test. And then if it's just the next bit, as you said, is politics, stakeholders, people, problems around
commercial
what's now more important.
Decisions. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, and then whether, again, if you skip, do you have good rules in place and discipline in place to come back and address that at the appropriate time? Yeah, lovely. Awesome question.
Okay, next one looks like fun as well. So I might have to do some translation, and you might need to help me. So my team are C# developers, but I've always written tests in TypeScript. What's your opinion on test engineers writing tests, brackets, in my case, API tests, in the same or different languages to their development teams? We kind of hit on that. Touched on this before.
It's slightly more about the repos and the reason why you might have a different repos, sometimes language.
Yeah.
Again, I think it depends, and it depends on what you're trying to automate. So C# itself, yes, there's tools out there, but is there a tool out there that fits your needs? Or are you going to end up reshaping your tests to fit the tooling that's available in the C# space? That's something we see often. So I'm not saying there is no tools for C#, but I can tell you that there's probably 20 more options in JavaScript or TypeScript than there is in C#. Or you'll be using a C# wrapper to end up talking TypeScript at the end, right? Or JavaScript at the end. So I think there's that thing is like, the way I would say you would go about this, though, is what are the types of tests you're trying to do? Start with that, understand your testability, then go looking for tools that fits that testability. And if the answer is not C#, then make your case.
Do we need to understand what problem we're trying to solve here?
That's what I mean by what test are you trying to automate?
Well, no, I was thinking more along the lines of, what advantages and disadvantages do you cause or can take advantage of? What advantages can you take advantage of when you've got the 2 sets of code written in the same language versus different languages.
Yep.
So in other words, is it important, or what makes it important to have them in the same language? Could it be, are you trying to foster a different kind of collaboration between the different roles on the team? And would it therefore be important to have those things in the same language? Or there's certain habits and practices that you're trying to encourage people in the team to take up. And if these are C# devs and they can't be asked learning TypeScript, that was way too judgmental. So they're C# devs, and they, for whatever reason, they aren't going to learn TypeScript right now. Like, that's not top of the agenda. Then it's like,
Yeah.
It's like the question that you asked around when you've got a failing bug. It's like, is this test important? It's like, well, is it important that they're in the same language? And if they are important, what makes it important? Are we back in it depends again?
Yeah. Well, we're about to bring. I think we're about to bring. I forgot the word. Reporter Vernon back into the mix, because in me and Mark, we never finished it, and we probably, obviously we probably never will now. But like, I probably should write something myself. Is that we had a tool selection canvas, right? And like, not saying we're talking about tools specifically here, but usually the parent thing for me is what the test we're trying to do, and what kind of assertion is it, because that usually helps me pick the tooling, right?
Okay.
But then you've also just said, who's writing the test?
Mm-hmm.
Is it just me? Or am I expecting the devs to write some tests? What pipeline are my tests going into?
Yeah.
How does that look? What does that exist?
Mm-hmm.
And then what we did, and like, I say this because I know you were going to say it again in a minute. What we did is we scored all those things to get kind of a weighting to which one was leaning more preferable based on those needs. So we went and found a tool and said, well, this tool can do our test exactly as we want it to be, 10 out of 10. But it's in TypeScript, 4 out of 10, because that's not the language of choice. How many of our developers know TypeScript? So again, another thing we used to teach in AIT is we made personas of everyone on the team. So what language do that? Yes, we're doing C# now, but do any of them know Java or TypeScript? I always go about trying to find that out.
Yeah.
And then we basically put that onto the canvas, and we ended up with a score for each tool. Mm-hmm. And then we kind of took that forward and said, these are the 3 options. This one prefers the people writing the test. This one prefers the tests. Mm-hmm. Which one do you want to pick? So I don't think there's an issue with it. I think you've got to tackle the next challenges you've just described. Will the devs write the test? Do you want that culture? Is that a culture you're after? Or is it testers write all the tests?
Right.
It's completely up to you. Complications come with the build and the pipelines. You're downloading new dependencies now. Like, if you've got and this is a very extreme case, right? You would never do this, but like, you're downloading .NET dependencies for your app, and then you're downloading Java dependencies for your automated tests. You've then got to manage 2 sets of repositories and package depositories. So now you're downloading from NuGet, and you're downloading from Maven, and you're downloading from NPM. Like, it all just starts to, we mentioned linting before. You've got 2 sets of linting tools. What language are you choosing for your pipeline? Like, it just becomes, again, in my opinion, more complicated. But as we said in the first question, I can think of many reasons to do it, and I can think of many reasons not to do it. And I have a preference, but that's not how I go about doing my job. I look at what's on the ground. I look at the context, and we'll make informed decisions.
Yeah, and I've also been in situations where we had our application was written in C#. And then we had testers who were writing amazing tests and amazing tools, but they were written in Ruby, and that just feels like quite a large, chasm to cross. It's one thing to say I'm a C# dev, and so that's what I'm working with, and I'm JavaScript, TypeScript, whatever. That's an extremely common. I would imagine a lot of devs, the population of devs that all know another language plus JavaScript, it's quite a big group of people.
Yeah,
but if you
absolutely.
go, who knows C# and Ruby?
Yeah.
Or who knows C# and PHP?
Yeah.
That might not be, that Venn diagram is probably not, doesn't feature a lot of overlap, I imagine. So I guess that's another factor. But no, I like that. I like what you said.
And that's a great way of visualizing, the Venn diagram. I mentioned scoring it, but how much overlap does a tool actually provide? And again, it doesn't mean you pick that tool, but that's the conversation I would want to be having. Whereas I've met consultants and I've had people on my teams are like, right, time to build a framework, downloads tool A, start setting it up. I'm like, whoa. Why tool A? Yeah, I always use tool A. You asked me about tool A on the interview. It was like, yeah, but like, why tool A for this project? I was like, yeah, just let's get going. It's like, no, we can't. It doesn't work that way, and it shouldn't work that way. Again, another, like, just to a very quick pivot, but another thing I see a lot of, and I think Vernon had this role for a while. Like, we started to see automation product owners for a while, and that's because this is my understanding of that journey. Is companies, large companies, like big companies, started trying to build one framework to rule them all. And they started making this framework, right? And then you've got
all their teams must use
150 teams using it. And then team A hates that pattern, team B hates that approach. And, then they start getting commits and changes, and, it just becomes absolute nightmare. And it's like, don't, in my world, I don't understand it. Don't do it. Let them build tools that fits that. You can have like little bits of a common library and stuff. You could have like something that logs you into a common mainframe or something that. But after like building blocks, but don't have one tool and say this is the tool you have to use, because again, you start to get these conflicts where it's people, it's preferences, it's the app, and there's lots of factors. It's the types of tests you're trying to do, and they're all so contextual. That I think one tool to rule them all just don't work. There'll be some tool vendor out there saying no, disagree, my tool. It's like football, right? Football, there isn't one team to rule them all. Like
whoa. I think we've already established that is actually not true. There is one team to rule them all.
Sure. My cheeks hurt from all this laughing.
Okay, right. That was an awesome question. So we've got another question here from. It's not Emily, but it is another E. So shout out to you, Eamon. Very kind. I'm not gonna get your last name right. Eamon Drocco. You sound like a supervillain. So
Game of Thrones vibes is what I got from that name.
Eamon is a legend. You should definitely follow him and Emily actually on their link. So Eamon's question, I think you'll like this one, Rich. So it says, why do you think that automation is seen as a sign of being technical, and why do you think some companies put automation skills on a pedestal when hiring? The difference between being junior and senior can sometimes be defined by ability to code. And then he goes on to say, someone can have all the critical thinking, systems thinking, ways of working, culture building skills, etc., but automation ends up having more weight than the rest. What do you think, Rich?
I feel like Mr. I'm not technical Vernon and Richard should answer this question. There's a lot to unpack. Yeah,
there is a lot to unpack. I know what you mean. I feel I empathize with what's going on behind this question. Let me just put it like that. I empathize with what's going on behind this question.
Right. Do you want to go? Do you want me to go?
Yeah, you go on. I'll jump in.
I'm going to try and go through it bit by bit. So,
are you going to start at the start and just?
Yeah, I'm going to start at the start. Right. Why do you think that automation is a sign of being technical? Mm-hmm. So, firstly, there's mass confusion, right, between technical and being able to code, right? We know that's a fact, right? We and you joke about it all the time.
If I have to go and find all the mentions of that in the previous episodes, it could be a long ass.
So the industry has a huge misconception with being technical and being able to code. That is a thing I always hear, and it's a thing I would always call out in an interview or whatever. When someone says that, I would say, what do you mean when you say technical? Like, I can break down a system into tiny little building blocks and model the whole thing for you, but I can't write code. I can read all that code. I know exactly what it's doing. I can Google it all. I can use AI to help me, but I can't write code. Going forward now, I know all the patterns, I know all the objects, I know all the methods, I know exactly what I want to do in my head. And I could tell that to an AI and it will write code. So like that like scale that we have, it's almost going to become kind of irrelevant. I know this is not an AI question, but the people that struggle with AI, or the negative we hear is, build me a website, right? Of course, that's going to be trash, right? It will build you a website, but it'll be utter trash, right? If you said, build me a website in Next.js using the root API, and I want you to follow this pattern, and I want you to tie that with an inner layer, and I want you to have the middleware do A, B, and C, right? You knew all that language and all that terms, and you told that to a set of agents, you will get something 1,000 times better. Still not perfect.
We're still vibe coding though, aren't we?
We are vibe coding, but with, again, like
there's vibe coding and there's vibe coding.
Yeah, that. I know that sounds ridiculous, but what I'm trying to say is, like, someone with strong technical skills will be so much better at vibe coding, than someone who's vibe coding, right? So that's my first thing. That distinction needs ironing out as an industry, and I think the reason why they put it on a pedestal.
Go on.
Technical versus coding, yeah. So I think that, because it says at the end the ability to code, right? That is a massive problem.
Misconception.
Now, putting automation on a pedestal, we know exactly why that is, right? Because it's still the silver bullet. It's still the thing that's going to revolutionize the whole of testing. It's the thing that's going to save you tens of thousands of pounds every sprint. It's the thing that's going to get you that rapid feedback, and it's just magic. You just do it; it just happens, and all that stuff magically arrives on your at the end of your pipeline, right?
I think there's another dimension to that, though, is that I think coding has been on a pedestal for the whole time I've been in the industry, and so what we're saying is, if you're a tester who, let's face it, ordinarily they are not necessarily always held in the same regard just anyway. But if you're saying you're a tester that codes, now you're perceived to be, oh well, you're a tester that codes, and we value these people over here who code. So if you also code, well then there just seems to be this inherent, well, you must be better than the people who don't code. I think that's a factor as well, just because we're more like this valuable thing over here.
Agreed. I absolutely agree with that. But now my next thinking of this question is, when you combine technical skills with strong coding skills, or the varying degrees of those two things, you do get kind of the unicorn people that, like, some people hear about and they want, right? So, and I'm going to put myself in the unicorn bracket, right? I am incredibly technical and also very proficient at coding. And the reason, but I view automation very differently to most people. So a lot of people still, like, see them everywhere, see them all the time. They will happily sit down and automate a UI. And if the UI does something, complain about it, right? Or if they can't work out why this page loads differently to that page, just go get someone else to deal with it, right? And they'll code their test around it. I don't do that because I consider myself more technical. I want to know how it works. I want to understand the building blocks. We mentioned that earlier around we're looking at the code. I want to understand all the layers and how they're all stitched together to bring that behavior that I see on the layer I'm trying to test on. So I think there's that aspect of being technical, which often like those two are separate in my world, but again, they get merged together. So someone who's very proficient and can automate on multiple layers might not talk about themselves being technical, but they obviously are. And then obviously we know that people can be very technical and not have the coding automation side of it. But yeah, so I think, like, I don't think, the other thing I would say is I don't think they should be on a pedestal, right? Because most of the things that I've taught over the years and the things that I still teach and talk about is not about the code. And I know I just made that shitty joke about AI, right? But the coding side is so, I always get told off in my own, I tell myself off when I say this because I'm just about to say it again, right? I don't want to say the coding bit is easy, because to some people it ain't, right? It's really bloody hard, right? But I would say the coding bit is, let's say it's a 2 out of 10, right? The designing a test, understanding the system, this data, the state management, the reasons why you're automating that in the first place, all this other stuff, so much harder to learn and so much harder to do well compared to writing the code. And I don't think, again, we don't talk about that enough as an industry.
You have reminded me of this really cool video. Yep, here it is. Well, I'll add this to the show notes. Have I died? Am I back? Do you hear me?
Yeah, you're here. You said you're going to add something to the show notes.
Oh, wow, it looked like it froze on my screen. So there's this blog post video by G. Paul Hill called TDD and the Lump of Coding Fallacy. And what you said reminded me about that. He talks about in the video that he's talking about it in the context of TDD and how some of the pushback you get is because, well, if I have to write test code before the application code, that's going to make things longer. And what he explains is that if you break apart the work that people are doing when they're coding, the typing into the keyboard is not coding.
Yeah.
Or that's not all that coding is. He says things like, well, as I'm stepping through the code and trying to figure out what the bloody hell that is, that's coding as well.
Well, Someone made a distinction. I've said this on the pod before. I can never know who it was. Made a distinction between programming and coding. Mm-hmm. And the programming is that thinking bit that you're referring to there, mm-hmm. and the coding is bashing keys. Like that's how they distinguish the two.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's what you're talking about here, which is
absolutely, look, yeah.
And I agree with you. That is not trivializing the typing stuff into the key. That
not at all.
You can be a virtuoso at that for sure, or you can suck at that for sure. It's also true that the thing that gives it legs and the thing that amplifies it, and I'm not even because there was a really interesting post I saw on LinkedIn. Let's see if I can find it where I can't remember the dude's name, but he was basically saying, I just want to code. That is what I want to do. I want to be at my keyboard, noise cancellers on, just designing and building something cool and amazing because that's what I love. That's why I got into this industry. I don't want to go to meetings. I don't want to go and talk to people about this thing. I don't want to go and talk to them about that thing and the other thing. And people had allergic reactions to that. But I reckon my presumption would be, I think he would agree that, the way that you get good, the way that you get good at the typing part is that whole, well, I'm able to inspect what this code does. I'm able to reason about it. I'm able to think about it. I'm not even talking about being a coder on a team. I'm talking about a coder on your own, building your own thing. You still have to do all of that stuff. It's not literally all typing stuff into the.
And I think I was trying to think of a way of summarizing those last two bits, but I think that we're kind of hinting at the challenge we see is that, and this ties back to my random soapbox at the start of the podcast, which was not planned, but right. What do they mean? Not does what Eamon mean when he says this, but like what does the job spec or the company mean when they say automation? What are they? Why have they put it in there? What's the underlying things they're trying to achieve? What problems do they actually have? Right, exactly. Because they've written. Go on.
No. Sorry, I was just saying. I've written a blog post about this very same same topic. It's what specifically do you need from this person?
Absolutely.
And it's it can be really frustrating when you're in an interview and people are saying, "Yeah, we've got this cultural problem, or we've got this process problem, or we've got this leadership problem.
Takes too long.
And this, that, and the other." And you go, and you're like, "Oh, okay, my skills are aligned with that. Amazing." And they're like, "Yeah, you do. These are great skills." And then you find out you've been unsuccessful in your application because you don't spend enough time in an IDE writing code, even though they didn't mention. You know what the biggest problem is? Is that we aren't writing code well enough. Like when people are sat at their IDEs, we don't have enough people who are virtuosos.
Absolutely.
That's not what they said. They said all this other stuff, which you can solve. So that can be supremely frustrating. I think that's another. Like you said, it's a really big issue. That misconception.
It's another huge rabbit hole, but it's also one where we spoke about the job market in the last release. It's another reason why you should just always apply if it looks vaguely doable, because that conversation you then get the chance to do what we're talking about here. You said A, but what do you mean? You said this, but what do you mean? And if you can get some of that out of them, that really helps. Because again, you mentioned, I mentioned the technical skills versus the automation /coding skills, right? if I was in my dream team now, like, and as in working every which possible way Richard could think of as being amazing, I wouldn't write any automation code, but I would plan them all. I would be leading that conversation in planning meetings. I would be helping them write the outline of a good test. I would be helping them stay up to date with the latest tools and approaches. But I wouldn't be writing the tests. But I'd be doing all that work you just mentioned that isn't bashing the keys. I'm still doing all that thinking. I'm still heavily involved in that. But I ain't bashing the keys.
Yeah.
And that's what I think you need to have the conversations around. And then that last bit, though, about jumping from junior to senior, I think as a general industry saying I'm a junior tester or a senior tester, that should not be tied to code. Like for me, the whole senior thing is usually around leadership and experience. Like you hire a senior because they've been in problem A before. And as soon as problem A comes up, they're not going to shit their pants and be like, oh my God. Like they're going to know how to deal with it. They're going to know how to be calm and collected and do the right steps. Whereas someone who's not been in that position is probably going to freeze and not know what to do. Not everyone, just like generalizing, but that's usually the war stories and the experiences that take you to that kind of senior level. You've seen more, you've been in more testability, you've been in more contexts. That's what should matter. Yeah, it shouldn't be your ability to code or not. But sadly, I think as evident on this post, it is.
So coding is a valuable skill to have, you know, and the more broader topic of being technical that Rich talked about before, is also a wise thing to invest your time in.
Absolutely. But then
and you just gotta keep. I wonder if, because I agree with Eamon. I think this perception is still out there even in 2025. But I wonder if, you know, that might be a possible upside of AI, in the sense that the thing that what are the things that humans are good at? Is the thing that is going to be highly valued the code, when everyone can use a tool to help them generate code?
That's what I tried to say before. Absolutely.
Is that still going to be? Now look, the state, again, it's on my to-do. I really want to play with these things.
You want to do some vibing?
I want to do some vibing, man. I haven't done it.
Perhaps we need to do a bonus live episode. We'll do some vibing.
Do some live vibing.
We'll do some pair vibing.
That's an excellent idea. I thought I was going to say that. Is it going to be the case that since we can all do that thing, we now have to get better at, okay, the critical thinking, like Eamon says, the systems thinking, the ways of working, describing what those things are, really helping people understand this is actually how I can add value to your thing, to your situation, to your company, to your context.
Absolutely. What's the most common message we see across the whole of anyone using AI? Garbage in, garbage out. Right? If you listen to anyone, if you can define and do, I know it's got a silly name, I don't really like the name prompt engineering, right? But if you can engineer a very, very good prompt, you will get the quality you get out of the back of that will be so much better. Now, given what you just said, though, I have a small challenge to the whole industry, though. Very, very few people in our industry can explain why they're good at testing. Like, what? I've just written a test. What did you do to write that test? Oh, I just wrote the test. Yeah, but what did you do? I just thought about it and wrote it. It's like, no, you didn't, right? You thought about the pattern, you thought about the assertion, you tested your assertion, you critiqued it, you went back to the story and referenced it again. As you said, we need to get better at all that stuff. And also we suck at that because that's why we're not valued. Like back to what you said earlier about being second-class citizens, is because we're not very good at explaining what we do. We're so bad at explaining what we do that for decades someone thought we could automate it all. Because all we do is run test cases.
I think another thing,
it's crazy.
Another answer to the question is, why do we think automation?
Yeah.
I think Agile is responsible for that. There was, for years upon years,
capital A or
capital A for sure. For years, it was told that we were told that, you know, the most important people on the team are the people who write the code. and everything is optimized to help those people to make their lives easier. I'm not even saying that's right or wrong. I'm not even getting into that. I'm just saying the consequence of that is if your contribution to the team was not necessarily based on writing code, that's where the trouble began, I would say.
Yeah.
Because that was quite a successful bit of a cultural shift or even a movement, you'd say, like, being agile. And I consider myself to be agile, lowercase a.
I think one last thing to answer that question, though, is, and I think it's, we're joking and not joking about, the state of the industry and what people need to do. But like, I consider myself a very, very good automation engineer. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is because I've intentionally balanced a lot of my skills. So I have not gone all in on being the best coder in the world, right? Mm-hmm. I've gone in and I'm a very good coder, but I've also stayed tool aware. I've continued to work on my critical thinking skills. I've continued to work on my test design skills. I've continued to evolve my system knowledge architecture skills, right? It's a constant, I don't have them all lined out, right? But let's say there was 20 bar graphs. It's constantly going like this, right? And that is what people need to be aware of. And as you said, understand your current bar graphs and try and map them into some context and see if you can land some of those roles and some of those influences, but also continuously analyze which of your graphs is dipping a bit and where do you need to invest time. You've just said it yourself. I need to find some time to have a go on the vibe coding stuff. I don't know your intentions, why you want to do that, but my guess is to be aware of what it can do, because you don't have any concrete experience of your own to be going around saying that's absolute trash, or that's absolute golden, or that's good in a certain context, because you've not a chance.
I've said this on other podcasts where I've been a guest. I kind of said, look, if we're going to critique, and this is very specific to AI, if we're going to critique AI, or if we're going to hype and promote AI, we need to be doing that from a position of
absolutely
knowledge and experience. Because I think it depends applies to AI just the same as it applies to everything else. And so, in order to be able to give the following information, it depends on X, Y, and Z. I think we need to foster both of those things: the skepticism, the healthy skepticism about, are we fooling ourselves into thinking this technology solves all the world's problems?
Yeah.
Or, are we being too playing it too safe, kind of saying, oh well, this can't solve any problems, therefore it's all trash. Like if we can manage or munge together those two views and oscillate between those two positions, I think we'll start to unlock the value, and we'll start to reveal where the dangers are and why we shouldn't be getting all in on this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, in my opinion, it ain't going away. But just to conclude some of the questions into one, that ability, that technical knowledge, that ability to know what testing is and how we work and how I work and how I would break down a task. If you like that, in the AI agentic episode we did, that's how you get value out of agentic AI, knowing how to break down the task the human did and get it to be done by AI. We need to start practicing that skill as well, because the tool won't go away, but the tool is I can't even describe from my own experiences, like if I don't word a question well, like, I don't want to go on an AI tangent, right? But it's experience. I've had it in the last few days, right? If I get my question wrong, it's giving me code, right, that is utter trash, right? But works. But because I'm experienced, I can immediately look at that and go, that's trash. And then I know enough of I know. So yeah, let me try and get it right, because I was gonna write a blog about this, but I've not blogged in like 20 years. So I was like, that's trash. But then what I had to do in my head was to work out why I've jumped straight to trash.
Yes.
And then I told it. I didn't say that's trash. I told it, isn't there? I believe I taught everyone talks these things in a different weird way, right? But I was like, I believe, instead of saying there's a better way, I was like, I believe there's a better way called ABC. Is there a reason why we're not using ABC here? And then obviously you get the answer you always get. Oh, very good point, Richard. Of course, yes, let's right. And then I look at that code and I go, that's still got this in it. Sure, can we not use this library? Right. But that's because I have enough knowledge to go through that.
That is the issue with. Sorry, go on.
If I designed a very good prompt at the start, I probably would have got straight to the point a lot quicker.
AI is not. I swear to God, I said this when I was hanging out with Mark last year at the Cambridge meetup. I just feel like I'm living in an episode of Star Trek with these Gen AI. Oh God, why am I talking to you about this? It's because a lot of the characters in those shows, this is now AI tangent, just going all out now. They just spend their time talking to the computer, and they do not worry about whether the computer is going to give them some hallucination or nonsense or craziness or, they have full trust in the tool. And I know we aren't there yet with, we aren't actually on the Starship Enterprise, but I do feel like we're going in that direction. And I find that pretty cool. Just like the inner 10-year-old nerd in me is like, this is amazing. I can just ask the computer for stuff and it gives me, as I saw somebody say on Twitter, when it was Twitter, it gives you information-shaped answers, and your expertise is the thing that enables you to kind of say, that looks like information, but it's actually trash. And here's how it's trash, and here's why it's trash. And I can explain to you, even though I made that judgment just like that, I can quickly reflect and say, okay, here's the issue. Hey, tool, it's wrong like this, or it's weird because of this reason or that reason. But anyway, we should probably stop.
You've just done my blog post, which is right. I want to share it very, very quickly.
Yeah, go on.
And I've been getting so much value from AI because of it. Number one, I've got a problem, right? Richard, no tools involved, thinks about the problem.
I thought that was going to be a full stop.
Maps out the solution, right? So I already know what I believe to be the best way or a very good way of solving this problem, right? And I could sit down now and start coding it. But what I've been doing is I've not been doing that. I've been describing the problem to AI and take 30 seconds to do it and see how it thinks it would solve the problem. And then I look at it and I either go, that's quite a good idea. Or I go, that's an absolutely terrible idea. And then I go back to my own problem, right? My own approach. But if it says something that I think is interesting, and that, like I said, that took 10 seconds, 30 seconds at most to get this informed, wrapped up, contextual opinion, right? Well, opinion's not the right word, but words on the screen. Yeah. But that says something that I go, oh, that's interesting. And now I do two things at this point. I go to the AI and I say, explain that in more detail to me. I'm interested in that bit. And I also go to Google and Google the same thing and do what I used to do pre-AI and start reading 4, 5, 6 tutorials, blog posts, whatever, on that topic, right? Then I come back to the AI and see how it defined it. And I go, well, that's not what I just read over here. Yeah. And all that's happening, and I'm talking 5-10 minutes here, but it's helping me justify my original decision, or I'm quickly learning a new approach, being basically guided into going to research something I didn't even know existed and would never have found by Google, because Google would not have told. Google cannot answer, how would you solve this problem? So I'm merging those two worlds now, and I'm getting so much value out of it. I cannot underestimate it.
Because the value is in the legwork, in doing the learning and doing the research, like doing the reading and piecing it together in your own head. That's an important step that is easy to skip if we over rely on the way that Gen AI tools are
absolutely
behaving now. I don't know if I'm not an expert on this. I always worry about talking about this stuff because I'm just not even in the same part of the galaxy of being an expert. Nonetheless, I'm interested in it and it's been fun. But
anyway, let's wrap it up.
AI will take us down. Yeah. But here's the thing. You asked. Thank you for those questions, everyone. Please keep sending them. But you said something interesting while we were answering that question. You talked about the fact that testers are not good at certain skills, and that seemed like a nice little segue to talk about where we're going to be.
Oh yes,
over the coming days and weeks and months ahead, where you might be able to hang out with us and some other cool folks in order to, upskill, learn, network, meet people. So where are you going to be? Like, what are you up to over the next few
Well, I think let's do
days
them
and
in
weeks
order,
ahead?
because I think yours is first, right? So you're going to
Well,
be in
I'm going
Europe.
to be at German testing days in a couple
Oh,
of weeks with my dear friend Berin Van Dalen, Mr. Berin Van Dalen, I should call him these days. Congrats to you, my friend.
congratulations, sir.
Yeah, we're going to be running a risk storming workshop at German Testing Days in Frankfurt on 13th of May, and it's going to be an AI focused risk storming session. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And then I think 10 days after that, 9 or 10 days after that, I'm going to be in Manchester for a men's mental health
I'll be
event
there. I'm there, yeah.
with Manchester Tech Fest. That's going to be absolutely amazing.
I'll see you there.
Yeah, and then the day after that, I'll be heading off to Zurich to see Mr. I'm going to get his name the wrong way around. I always do. Hilary Henrik Agata is organising with his pals the Greatest Quality Conference in Switzerland. That's going to be very exciting. So I'll be speaking there. They've got some amazing keynote speakers there. You should definitely go and check that out. And then later on in the year, fingers crossed, I'll be at Agile Testing Days in one way, shape, or form. I think whether I sneak in the back through the fire escape or sneak my way in or hide in Rich's suitcase, I'll be at Agile Testing Days one way or another. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but yeah, I'll stop there. What about you? What are you up to?
My first one is September. I think it's the end of September. I'm keynoting at Test It in Malmo.
Oh.
So looking forward to that. Talking about, funny enough, actually, what we just discussed. I'm talking about how we're scared, but how everything feels new and shiny. And like there's a trillion things to learn. But actually, I think we have all the skills already as testers for this new wave of software development.
Listen, I've
and
said
I'm
the
going to
same
bring
thing.
them to the forefront. So I'm looking forward to that.
100%.
And then, yeah, Agile Testing Days, I'm doing a tutorial on automation strategy. So if your automation is currently like a headache for you and not giving you any value, then come to the automation tutorial at Agile Testing Days. And then, as mentioned earlier, I'm leading the deep dive track with Gil and Christian. So yeah, I'll be ATD, and that's it for the moment. I was meant to get some personal training up and running, but that's not happened. So, like, if you want me to come back and start doing training courses again, and you'd love to attend one of them, like, start pinging me to give me the motivation to get that going again. But yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting loads of people. See what happens.
I've just remembered I'm going to be in Sweden as well for AuraDev as
Oh, I
well.
love all
So
that.
yeah, I'm speaking at AuraDev on the testing track. Really excited about that. I've never been to AuraDev. Wanted to go there for years upon years. So I'll be going there, and that'll be awesome.
All right, I think this is our longest episode ever. But anyway, hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, it's hard to avoid AI rabbit holes and joyous football celebrations. But yeah, we'll see you at the next one.
Champions, champions, champions. Okay, sorry. See you later.